watching those guys go from like being that kind of like little goofy kid that was like just, well, I'm just here because my dad told me to, and now like they're actually like, starting to see colleges talk to them, or they're starting to get to play on Friday nights and stuff, and they're like, I'm far beyond anybody else technique wise on my team, because I've been doing this for so long. But it's like they start to like kind of grow into their own. Those voices get deeper, bodies get bigger. It's so funny like getting to actually see some of these kids grow from, this little goofy kid into like grown men.
Hello and welcome to the Verbal Commitment Podcast here on the Kansas City Sports Network, brought to you by Home Field Apparel. I'm Kevin Flaherty, and I'm joined as always by my good friend Ryan Wallace, and we're talking about the world of local recruiting from Kansas and Kansas City prospects to the college classes at Kansas, Kansas State, and Missouri. We have the second edition of the Kansas City Varsity Combine, the second local edition, I should say. There was one in St. Louis between the two Kansas City ones coming up this weekend. So expect us to talk about that, especially with this week's guest, EOE, that stands for Elevate or Eliminate, founder and trainer Chris Gomez, one of the top offensive line coaches and trainers in the area. As always, if you like what you're hearing, comment below, tell your friends about us, subscribe, hit that like button, or leave us with a 5-star review wherever you get your podcasts, like Apple or Spotify. All those things help us with the algorithm, help us to grow the show, and put us in front of more people like you. Before we get into a little bit of that,
before we get into what you're about to get into, we have a special alert that I need to get going here. This one, Kevin, is an injury alert. Nick, can you throw that up for us?
Oh gosh, we're putting that on there, aren't we?
Yeah, I went there, Kevin. First, shout out, thoughts and prayers to you, Kevin, because you're gonna have to. Looks like you're gonna endure combine season with the boot.
Well, actually, we'll be without the boot on Saturday because, like so many elite athletes across various sports, Ryan, I'll have to wear the boot to stay off the foot for a little while. But ultimately, game time comes, and there's no way I'd be able to make it up and down at Pius with that boot on. So I will be going bootless on Saturday and probably suffering for it. And then pretty much the second we get back home, I will be throwing the boot back on and retreating into hibernation. But
perseverance, kids, perseverance.
It's what we try to do. After that and before the combine talk, let's go ahead and start with our player profile. Ryan and I each picked one player, one from Kansas and one from the Missouri side of the Kansas City Metro, that we feel could maybe use a little bit more buzz because of the work they've been putting in. Ryan, you're on the Kansas side this week, so who are you thinking about?
Well, stop me if you've heard this before, because I feel like it's about 3 or 4 years running between you and I, but there's a skill talent at Olathe West that we like. This year, it's Vaughn Overton. We were there with, Anthony Favreau a couple years ago. We were there, with Elijah Hakeem a couple years ago, just a blazing speedster. Last year was Tevin Gassaway. This year, it's Vaughn Overton on the defensive side, 6'2", 180-pound cornerback. And Kevin, I'm really excited. He's on the list to be at the combine on Saturday. We will see him live and in color because I am really excited to see what he can do in coverage. I think on tape, he's one of the most skilled natural cover guys in KCK on the Kansas side this year in the 2026 class. You see, even at times when he over pursues, Kevin, he's got just that tremendous length. And I think he gets off the line really well. I think you're seeing him develop a little bit more fluidity. Does a great job, I think, of keeping his eyes in the backfield at the right times. I think that when you think about and talk about, here he's on some closing speed, and I'll get back to kind of that clip in a second, but this last clip might actually be my favorite because you see the agility and just how fluid he is in the back pedal. And you saw him do it against some teams that had some really nice receivers last year. Lawrence Free State was a tape of his that I really liked. And again, they had some guys that I think really challenged him, and he stepped up to the plate. But getting back, I mentioned how I think he's one of the best true cover corner guys in our area this year. Just tremendous length. He's training with Kinder Carper. The what is it? Kinder Carper's Island that they call it. So I mean, he's only been training with him since February, and I think the more that those two can work here throughout this offseason and into his senior year, it's going to pay big time dividends. But again, getting back, I think the closing speed is there. I think there are times that maybe there's a tendency to over pursue a little bit. The tackling is probably the one thing that I think is an area of growth, and he probably knows that. But again, where he's going to make his mark, and we hopefully will see it on Saturday. We saw it last fall, and I think he's going to intrigue some folks at camps with it, is just his ability to lock down. I think the coverage is all there. If you've got a willingness to be physical, coaches can come and teach you how to tackle, right? But I think all the things that go into being a true cover man, that's harder to find, but you can find it at Olathe West this year with Vaughn Overton.
Yeah, and I think the tackling is going to come along with natural weight room growth as well, and added physicality there. Moving on to Missouri, Ryan, I'm going to pick a player that I know you're a fan of because I have to admit you noticed him before I did, and that's Lee Summit West linebacker Ronye Toombs Jr. at 6'2", 230 pounds. Toombs is dense and powerful, but as they say in Glengarry Glen Ross, coffee is for closers, and Toombs should get all of the coffee because this guy absolutely
what a pull
on ball carriers in a hurry. Let's bring up the clips, Ryan, because I know he would be a member of our quote unquote all fun tape. They move him around on this defense, but you really see once he locates a target and he knows where he's going, he has this ability to just get downhill and get from A to B in an absolute hurry. I think the recognition stuff will be interesting to see because he moves around and does so much, right? He's playing an end spot there. You see him more as a middle linebacker at times. He kind of moves all over the place. But, man, if you just say to me, hey, you're in a drill, what's that new sport that they're doing now where you just basically run forward and somebody tries to tackle you? Have you seen that?
Yeah, like straight line or something.
Straight line, yes. In straight line, Ronye Toombs would be an absolute beast because he closes in a hurry. Ryan, I want to get your thoughts on him as well, but I also want to kind of use this to transition to our next section as well, because Toombs is a guy I think both of us would really love to see in a combine setting to get some verified data on his speed. On tape, the speed really pops when he closes, as well as some measurements. What do you think of Toombs? And also, we'll get there in a minute, but I look forward to talking about some guys that you also would like to maybe see in a combine setting.
Well, with Toombs, he's a guy, again, you mentioned it, like we'd love to see him in person. Hopefully we get a chance to either this offseason or come his senior year, because I'd love to see the length on him, right? Like not just how tall he is, but the wingspan, how much room does he have to grow? Like, could he be a defensive end in some systems? I think for me, what I like about just, again, the speed is there, whether you want him covering sideline to sideline, I'm not so sure, but that's why I think the closing speed and everything is there for me as more of like a Week or a Mike. The tape was very Melvin Laster to me. It was another kid that kind of, Liberty North did a lot of different things with, and he ended up going to UNLV.
Another fun tape guy.
Certainly. And again, I think UNLV and Barry Odom's old staff got sold on the fact that this is a guy that, if we need him to pass rush, pursue from the linebacker standpoint, he can, but he was certainly dependable in terms of run support in the interior from the linebacker position. You knew he was going to be sound, and he had the body that was going to be able to withstand the contact and playing, up against the line and in the, 7-man front. So I like that idea for RJ Toombs, but again, a guy that we probably would like to see in person to see maybe there is a little bit more positional flexibility at the college level, like he's played with at Lee Summit West for sure.
Yeah, and he's working with Michael Rose-Ivy on his pass rush moves, on the bend and dip and the hand usage and all of those things. So I am interested to see, hey, if you got a chance to see him in person, do you see him as more of a defensive end? Is he somebody that you get out and you see him and you're like, this is a Mike. That's where I want him. I think that's one of those things that combines can be really good for telling stuff about. And that's one of the reasons I like combines, Ryan, is I do think that there are questions that you can answer, even if you don't necessarily go in with like questions where you're like, hey, is this guy big enough? Is this guy fast enough? I think you can come out of it with a lot of clarification. And so I'm interested to hear who are maybe some players in the area that you would love to see and evaluate in a combine setting, whether it's going to be at Casey Varsity on Saturday or whether it's just, hey, I'd love to see this guy in a combine somewhere, somehow.
Well, first off, let me just say, I'll try not to be long-winded here, but, we're never going to downgrade somebody on, not attending a combine or a camp. We understand that there's schedule conflicts or other things that might get in the way of an attendance. And so we're, it's not like, oh, well, we saw this guy and we didn't see this guy at a combine, so you get downgraded. What it does help is it gives us a better breadth of who these players are.
Sure.
And so when it does come down to crunch time, we have a little bit more data to go off of rather than just word of mouth or your tape, right? So it does help. And so when I say that, I think it'd be nice to see Ronell Johnson at combines. Yeah. I'm spoiled is the wrong word, but I'm envious in that way. Like I wish we could see Armand Weathers, but I think at times some of those big name guys think, or kind of have it in their head, and I don't mean to single those two guys out. I think this goes back a long ways. I think guys see that they have the offers and they get a little nervous about, whether or not, am I going to get hurt? Am I going to get exposed? All those sorts of things. Here's what I would tell the top prospects out there that are nervous about coming to the combines for those very reasons is, yeah, there might be a risk of injury, but you could get injured playing pickup basketball or something in the summer, right?
Sure.
And then in terms of getting exposed, look, maybe sometimes getting exposed isn't the worst thing. Maybe it humbles you and you learn an area that you need to grow or strengthen a little bit more. And maybe, as you and I have found out from a lot of these combines, there might be a kid that gets exposed by an underrated guy, right? Like, oh my God, who's this kid that just, tore the wood off the 4-star? And then come to find out after a couple months that doesn't look like, such a bad rep for the top guy, because we find out that, that other guy wasn't so bad. We just didn't know about him. You know what I mean? And so I always encourage guys, if I had to, put my finger on some guys this Saturday that I wish was there, Parker Schwartz at Prairie View High School in Lacine, which is, about an hour south of Pius. That's a kid that we wouldn't normally probably get a chance to get out and see in the fall. This would be a great opportunity for us to see him. Maybe he shows up, fingers crossed. And then on the Missouri side, same thing. Some of the small school kids would be nice to see them challenge some of the bigger names that might be there from bigger schools. Amari Powell comes to mind from Odessa for me, a really talented wide receiver. Those are the types that we'd love to see at combine. The more reps you get, the more exposure. It's never a bad thing. Never look at it as a bad thing. I think it can only help prospects grow.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned a couple small school guys, because I think a couple guys that I would like to see are a pair of Lee Summit North guys. But yeah, I'd really like to see William Ray out in that sort of setting. He's such an interesting build, right? Because he's built kind of like a box safety or maybe even a linebacker, but he's also agile enough that he plays point guard at Lee Summit North. And so seeing him out there in space, run around, being able to see him bend and move would be really cool. Would also love to see Marcel Reed out there, because I think he'd do really well in the King of the Hill type events with the type of powerhouse he is in short area stuff. Things like that I would really enjoy it. But like you said, we're never going to downgrade a kid for not going, and we're not going to downgrade a kid typically for going and not faring well. It's just more information sort of in this box. And ultimately, football is played on Friday nights in pads and the tape doesn't lie. It's just another part of that evaluation process.
No doubt.
And speaking of the Kansas City Varsity Combine, we'll have top offensive line trainer Chris Gomez, who will be preparing some of the linemen that we'll see this weekend on the show in a minute. But first, we want to tell you about our friends over at Home Field Apparel. Look, we talk every week about how you can support your local college with sweatshirts, pullovers, jackets, baseball gear, t-shirts, and more. But our man Nick Springer behind the scenes is a racing fan. And gosh darn it, we would be remiss if we didn't mention that Home Field is putting out its Indianapolis Motor Speedway gear now. to go along with a strong overall racing collection. If racing isn't your thing, don't worry. Kansas State, and Missouri currently have more than 40 items to choose from. So head on over to homefieldapparel.com, use the promo code link below in the description, and you can get 15% off your first order. We'll be right back.
Looking for tickets for your next event? Tickets for Less is your #1 source. Save big on every purchase when you use promo code KCSN at ticketsforless.com.
Success in real estate takes more than vision. It takes the right financial partner. When someone takes something rundown and turns it into something great, that's called a comeback story. Like Bryan Group. They take distressed properties here in KC, completely rework them, and then turn them into valuable real estate. But that kind of work needs the right bank behind it. Enter Emprise Bank. They're not about cookie-cutter loans. They saw Bryan Group's vision, backed them, and now they're making big moves in Kansas City real estate. Talk about your partner in possible. Emprise doesn't do one-size-fits-all financing. They invest in potential and back growth. Visit emprisebank.com/KC to learn more. Emprise Bank, member FDIC, equal housing lender.
It's playoff time, and if you're still just watching games, then you're missing out. With Pick 6 from DraftKings, you can turn your hoops knowledge into real cash. Just make your picks, track your score, and if you hit all 6, you're looking at bigger payouts than Prize Picks flex plays. Nobody's dropping better payouts than Pick 6. Hit 6 picks, and that's 25 times your cash. And if you beat your competitor, you could be looking at a 500 times bag in your pocket. And right now, new customers get $50 in bonus picks with just a $5 entry. The playoffs are on, so why not take a shot at making a little money while you're watching? Download the DraftKings Pick 6 app right now and use code KCSN. That's code KCSN to play $5 and get $50 in bonus picks. Better payouts, bigger wins, only on Pick 6 from DraftKings. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org in Connecticut. Must be 18 plus. Age and eligibility restrictions vary by jurisdiction. Pick 6 not available everywhere, including New York and Ontario. Void where prohibited. One per new customer. Bonus awarded as non-withdrawable Pick 6 bonus picks that expire in 14 days. Limited time offer. Terms at pick6.draftkings.com/promos.
We're back with the Verbal Commitment Podcast, sponsored by Home Field Apparel, and we're joined by EOE founder and local offensive line trainer and coach, Chris Gomez. Coach, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me on, guys.
Coach, for those who maybe don't know you or your backstory, can you tell us a little bit sort of about what you do, how you train guys, and also how you got started?
Well, I'll start with how I got started. First off, I was a local guy, went to St. James Academy, grew up at KCK. Played at Central Missouri. I had a pretty good career at UCM and tried to see what I could do with some pro level stuff. I was talking to a couple teams coming out of college and just tried to see what happened there. And so I actually started working with Will Shields, and obviously that's a pretty good guy to try and emulate your game after and whatnot. So I think everybody in Kansas City understands that one. But I started with him, trying to get some stuff going there, and things didn't work out. Contracts didn't come as it happens to about 99.9% of guys that are trying to do pro level stuff. And so ended up turning my all my efforts and whatnot into trying to work with kids and help that process. And one thing led to another. Ended up running his whole program there, and that monster where I kind of created some things there have turned into what's going on today. And I think it's everything's kind of on the come up, and it's just still growing every day. So I'm pretty excited to see how that goes.
When did you know, I feel like I could be a pretty good, teacher of the skills. Like, there's a lot of guys that are able to play, but they can't, connect with the younger audience and tell them, in a proper coach way, like how to do things. When did it dawn on you? Like, I think I might be pretty good at this.
Honestly, I think to this day, I still try and wonder if that's actually the case or not. No, I'm just kidding. No, there was kind of early on, I felt like I was doing all right with it, and guys were kind of picking things up and starting to kind of roll with some stuff, and when people started reaching out to me and asking like specifically, hey, what can I do, and that was kind of where I was like, maybe this is something I could seriously look at of getting better with. And I'm at heart, I'm still kind of a younger guy. I'm immature in my own mind sometimes, and so relate to a lot of these guys I'm dealing with, and be bridge the gap a little bit from having to talk to their coach or their school about questions, or maybe sometimes there's that wall that's built up between those guys, whereas I don't have that wall with those guys. I'm pretty much an open book, and I think that allows them to be able to see themselves potentially in my shoes and what I went through. And a lot of it, as far as relating to the guys, is I more or less tell them I was in your shoes at one point and this is the roadmap I followed, and luckily I was in the right place at the right time, and that's why I'm able to do what I do now. And my apologies, gentlemen. And so I think that's where a lot of it comes from, is those guys being able to see maybe that they could potentially do what I've done. And I don't lie to people. I was kind of a knucklehead in high school and whatnot, and hopefully I've turned some of those things around. So
from a coaching and technique standpoint, I'm kind of interested when guys come to you for the first time. What's the problem that you see the most often? The thing that you're like, hey, you walked in the door, this is something we gotta fix right away that kids maybe don't have naturally, or they don't have.
I mean, honestly, the main issue I see a lot of guys in, is maybe a cop-out answer, is pass pro. And a lot of these guys, they don't have the time to actually learn it, or the coaches have the time to break down the details of the whole process in their small window they have a practice. And now that the Missouri's allowed to do spring ball and all that stuff, Kansas still is kind of behind the 8 ball on some of that. And so only some of the guys are allowed to get so much time with their coaches, and even then, it's kind of like standing there, your dad tells you to do something every time, but as soon as somebody that's not your dad tells you to do it, you're like, that's a pretty good idea, right? And so that's kind of where a lot of that comes from. And with this being what I do, I have the time to take and slow the details down and allow guys to actually progress with it, versus hey, I got 15 guys that I got to get them in 10 minutes to teach them how to do this, and then we got to go run inside run here in the next 20 minutes and try and do something complete polar opposite of what we're talking. And so so much of the time that gets spent for these high school boys is on the X's and O's, and less about how to actually do it. And that's where guys like myself come into play.
I remember being out, and spending an entire afternoon up at 68 Inside Sports years ago with watching Jordan Willis, right, get trained with Will Shields.
Yep.
And I remember being blown away, and then kind of like you said, it dawns on you, no, he's this good because he is he's Will Shields. He's supposed to know everything. Right. But is there a piece of advice or coaching technique or something that you feel most the light bulb clicked for you from Will Shields that you still carry today?
No, honestly, when it came to dealing with a guy like that, if you're smart and what you're standing in front of, you kind of hang on every single word that comes out of the mouth, because, technically, I was told by a lot of guys, told by a lot of divisional schools coming out of high school, told by a lot of pro guys, I was considered undersized being 6'2", and, I actually distinctly remember vividly my first meeting I had, sitting there in the office talking to him and the other trainers, and I was like, this is what's been going on. These are the guys I've talked to. I did workouts with these teams over junior days and stuff, and just trying to get this whole process started. And, obviously this is the place I need to be if I'm an offensive lineman. I was like, but, being 6'2", I'm undersized, all that stuff. And I just remember at the end of the meeting, the last, the leaving words we had is he stood up and I'm standing there and I'm as taller than him. He's like, there's no such thing as being undersized, and shook my hand. I was like, all right, this is the place I need to be at. It's pretty legit. And so, the biggest thing with Will is the dude is just such a freak, massive human being, such a a savant with the game, so smart with every detail that he did, and just crazy athletic, and that's just stuff you can't teach, and being able to learn the little nuanced things that he did, because he's very unorthodox in a lot of things that he did when he played, and just being able to learn that, I think is one. It made me better, got me better almost immediately when I started to compete against other guys at higher levels, but also too, it's taught me a lot of tricks and stuff that I'm putting on these guys that's a little unorthodox than what they'll go hear at a camp with a college coach or other high school coaches. And so, I think that's kind of what sets myself apart in the training game and what set him apart in his playing ability. And so that's kind of one of the lasting effects that he's kind of had on me. So
obviously you're training football, but at the same time, like you said, you have this ability to relate to the kids. Mm-hmm. And ultimately, football for most of these kids, just about all of them, is going to be sort of a window or a way for them to become a fully functioning human being in society at the end of the day. I guess, how rewarding is that process for you? I mean, not just the, hey, your hand goes here when the defensive tackle goes here, but more so the other stuff and developing, seeing the kids grow up and develop as people.
It's pretty cool, like some of these guys, they've started me when they were like 7th grade, 8th grade, and just complete and utter knuckleheads, like standing in the back of the line. I'm like, dude, you got to stop talking for 2 seconds, man. Like, come on now. Like you're in 7th grade. I got guys that are in seniors right now trying to get ready in the same workout. Like, just shut up, please. And but watching those guys go from like being that kind of like little goofy kid that was like just, well, I'm just here because my dad told me to now like they're actually like, starting to see colleges talk to them, or they're starting to get to play on Friday nights and stuff, and they're like, I'm far beyond anybody else technique wise on my team, because I've been doing this for so long. But it's like they start to like kind of grow into their own. Those voices get deeper, bodies get bigger. It's so funny, like getting to actually see some of these kids grow from, this little goofy kid into like grown men, truthfully. And so that's a really fun process, just watching that whole thing. And, I have guys now that started when they were freshmen, and now they're out of high school or out of high school, out of college. And it's just like, what the heck happened? Where did the time go? It's insane. It's fun.
I was going to say one of those kids, and it might have been right around my introduction with you. You were coaching at Lee Summit North, and there was kind of a savant athlete there that caught my attention right away. That is now a top 10 NFL draft pick. When did you know that Armand Membu was Armand Membu?
I mean, like you can watch that kid run around when he was in high school and just be like, there's something different about this dude.
Yeah.
I mean, he was a big body for a high school kid. Now the dude's an absolute creature. He's an animal now, but back then, like he was still a big guy for high school. I mean, he was running like 5'2", 5'3", which guys that size in high school shouldn't have been doing that. Honestly, he probably was touching 5'1". I can't remember. It was ages ago of taking a lot of hits to the head, but like you knew there was like something serious about that dude going to happen, and then, I just remember one of the coolest moments for me is when he first got to Mizzou. That's when Marcus Johnson was the O-line coach there. And, obviously he's done a great job now he's at Ohio State. But I just remember like his first spring practice or first week of spring practice, like I get a phone call. He's like, "Coach, what's up, man?" I was like, "Oh, how you doing, dude? Like, what's going on? Like, how's Armand doing?" He's like, "This guy's already doing stuff that we do. Like, he's doing stuff that we teach." He's like, everything you're doing is right. And he's like, this kid, he was kind of saying the same things. Like, this dude's going to have a serious career. And, those early moments like that, just being like seeing, what he was doing. He was so technical. He was so coachable. Like, he hung on every word and put it into action. And it was like, you knew something was going to happen. Now, did anybody back then know he was going to be top 10? No, I don't think anybody could ever really gauge that, but he's obviously like far surpassed anybody's expectations of what he can do, and he's going to continue to do that just because who he is internally as a person and how he was raised. So
you talked a little bit about just sort of high school coaches not necessarily having as much time to coach technique, right? You're trying to your system, you're trying to teach a guy, hey, go here, block this guy,
right?
And we're seeing, especially on the Kansas side, it feels like an explosion of teams going to like Flexbone and things like that, where it's good for the high school. It helps swim, but not necessarily great for the aspiring college offensive linemen. And here we have the Kansas City Varsity Combine coming up. And the reason I bring that up is it's pretty similar to what you're going to see when you go to a college camp, when you're quote unquote singing for your supper for a scholarship, and at that point, you need to know how to pass pro because that's what they're going to have you do. I guess what's that transition like, and how important is it for these guys to be getting this work sort of outside of their high school, where it's like, yes, we're going to help you with what you do on Friday night, but also if you want to play in college, there's more that you need to be doing to get ready for that whole process.
Right. I mean, it's extremely important, because everybody, when they first get to college, is going to get stripped down on their technique and completely reworked and how that system works and how that coach wants to do it and his verbiage, his all that stuff. But if you're starting completely from zero, that is exponentially more difficult for these kids. And honestly, in today's game where it's so hard to get recruited as it is, unless you're a 5-star plus, a lot of these schools aren't knocking your doors down anymore. And so I get really frustrated, and I understand it. A lot of these high schools do it because, maybe they don't all have 6'3", 270 plus pound offensive linemen. It's hard for them to line up and do some of those things. Maybe they have a kid that's 6'1" or under 100 pounds or under 100 pounds, under 200 pounds trying to do this stuff. And, it makes more sense that they're trying to go that flex bone style. But I mean, I've been talking about this until I'm blue in the face. Like, more and more of these teams are going to that, and it's making it more difficult unless you have Harding or one of the naval or one of the like military schools walking in your school. It doesn't translate that well for what these kids need to look for. And so, that's where, like, honestly, right now, like in my training process, I'm almost exclusively doing pass pro stuff just to get prepared for these camps because, you walk into these camps, there's 300 kids there, you have 2 to 3 reps. And so that's your elevator pitch to say, hey, you need to pick me over somebody else. And that's like making these kids like, and even like a coach walking in those camps, he's not expecting you to know how to do a lot of this stuff, right? But he just wants to see 1, how you move, 2, how physical you can be, and 3, how you respond. And so in a lot of those situations, like if the kid doesn't know what he's doing, the confidence is going to be down, right? He's not going to be sitting there trying to be the aggressor because it's a completely new system or completely new movement he's never done before. It's going to look kind of messed up and wonky. And so like a lot of these coaches immediately are going to maybe be turned off by how some of these kids look in that process versus like at least going in and looking correct, right? If you could at least come in and like look like you're somewhat know what you're doing, or you have the confidence, like, all right, I've at least done this a couple times before I go in and try and put hands on somebody that's trying to run through my face, then like that situation is immediately a much higher percentage for you to succeed in versus like just going into it with your eyes closed and hoping for the best. And even some of these guys coming in just getting reps, like 1 to 2 days of just getting reps before they even have to get thrown into the system or into these camp situations are pivotal. And I know that's kind of what KC Varsity's position in this whole camp scene is. That's why they run their camps earlier. So some of these college coaches come and look at guys, or guys can get prepared before they go to Lindenwood or some of these other places to really be seen by a lot more higher level schools and a lot higher volume of coaches. But again, that's still like, if you have a small school coach and you're from a small town and you come in and, maybe you kind of struggle a little bit, you might not get the opportunity to see that person again. How does that lasting impression stick with that coach? And that's kind of where a lot of these guys need to start looking at that whole situation is, you have to make that lasting impression with some of these guys before you walk out of the building, before they walk out of the building.
We've asked this question to like Justin Hoover about quarterbacks. We've asked it to like Joseph Potts and those guys over at Top Speed, and some of the guys that they've trained. I'm curious though, because offensive line has always been kind of the cornerstone, the lifeblood of recruiting in this area. Right. I mean, you might be able to get better skill talent in Florida and California, whatever. But I mean, people know that line has always been strong, and yet it seems to have only gotten stronger in the last couple of years. I remember going out to a training camp of yours, and in that one day, you've got Jeremy Schleicher, you've got Braden Hales, you've got Andrew Babalola, and you've got a pretty talented kid that I think at that time was like about to be a sophomore, Jackson Cantwell from Nicoletta, who's I think the number 1 player in the country. If he's not the number 1 player, he's the number 1 offensive lineman. Right. How far have you seen the position grow since your St. James days? And is there a reason for like why guys have accelerated that position so much?
Honestly, like that's really like, that's a tough question to say. I mean, there's probably so many different things that have played a role in how that has grown and how it's changed. And I know back when I was in school, Kansas City got recruited pretty well, but St. Louis was just blowing us out of the water in the amount of people that were getting recruited. And they were kind of like going to St. Louis and like, oh, we're a couple hours away, so we might swing by, hit Rockers, Blue Springs, and then hit KCI and get the hell out of Dodge, And so, sorry, I probably shouldn't say that. Apologize. Much worse. But that has changed so much. Obviously, with guys like Caden Green and Armand Mimbo and guys like that, they've really kind of changed the game with how that recruiting process has gone for a lot of guys, and they've really put Kansas City on the map. Even like look back at like Mason Richmond, going from D end in high school, but he was such a freak athlete in his size, that now he's obviously in the NFL as an offensive lineman, did great with Iowa and stuff like that. And so, through that time, I think you have a couple guys that have kind of become the standard for what people expect out of Kansas City. And most of the guys that come out of Kansas City have done amazing, amazing things with their careers and are continuing to do with their careers. And so I think that's just going to continue to grow. Plus, you're going to play into the whole fact that, the Chiefs have been insane and been fantastic. And so, everything kind of goes with the ebbs and flows of the professional teams. When the Royals were winning, baseball was huge in Kansas City. Chiefs are winning now. Football's starting to grow. More people are getting excited about it. More kids want to play. People want to see these guys go. And with that growth of that, you got guys like Trent Williams in the NFL that, they're like, I want to be like that person. I want to be like this. Now guys see Armand Mimbo come from their own backyard, and they're like, that's another guy I want to be like. And, with that continue to grow, I think, the sky's the limit with where Kansas City goes as far as, being on the map as a national treasure of offensive line coming out. So
you always hear coaches say that in camp and combine settings, defensive linemen have the advantage over offensive linemen. Mm-hmm. Does it even things out a little bit, though, when you're starting to see these camps and combines, one of which is KC Varsity, that they put them in pads. And so offensive linemen, they have a little bit more to hit back with. It's not just, hey, the defensive lineman can grab their shirt, rip around or whatever. They've got a little bit more armor to fight back with.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It makes a difference. I'm not worried about those shoulder pads ripping off when I'm holding on to your shirt. No, I'm just kidding. There is a level of that, but no, 100%. Like I've always said, like, and I've done camps where we do like the pass rush and the one-on-ones with no pads, and like there's a time and a place for it. But my issue with a lot of these camps that do it is everybody's just trying to big bro each other, and who's gets slammed on their necks and ripping shirts, and everybody's trying to like get up and like stand over people, and like I think that's kind of just played out. If you go out and you put pads on, now it's a realistic rep. O lineman can bite back, D lineman can bite back. We get actually play a little bit, put hands on each other versus just like trying to run and just trying to keep everybody at arm's length. And then you get somebody that bull rushes and you can't stop either side of that. And so
how many times do we hear it? No bull rush, no bull rush, bull rush.
And then what's the very first rep is a bull rush every single time. But I think it makes it so much cleaner of what you're actually going to see, and it gives the college coaches a more realistic look of what they're going to get in the kid doing that stuff versus like, you have a kid that has great feet, but if he goes to punch a guy, he has nothing to grab onto. I mean, yeah, holding's a penalty, but we have to hold every single play as offensive lineman. Like that's part of what it is. We are taught to grab the shoulder pad and squeeze, right? And so that's how it is. And so if there's nothing there to grab, it becomes like we're just sitting here with closed fists trying to hope we can just press you off and things like that, and it just doesn't quite work the same. And so I think KC Varsity putting shoulder pads on and stuff like arguably might be the best move that they've ever done in the history of that camp. It's going to help them continue to grow and continue to do things. It's going to make people want to actually come back camp after camp because they can compete in a realistic setting and kind of see how things continue to grow.
Well, I've been the one coach that's been kind of, going through your Rolodex of all the guys that have come through. I mean, Jackson Cantwell is still in your system and in your program right now. But I'm curious kind of who are some up-and-comers that you like, maybe where their trajectory is going? And specifically, I wanted you to maybe lead off with the name LaMarcus Barber.
Yeah, that was kind of the first name that popped into my head. It was really cool to see kind of where he came from last offseason to obviously jumping on the scene and, game 2 lining up against a guy like Kamari from Lee Summit North and biting back a little bit and getting to fight and maybe sometimes, I mean, I think we could all be honest, like you'll see a little bit more talent sometimes on that Missouri side, especially on the defensive line position on those interior guys. I mean, North Kansas City's always put dudes out, Lee Summit North, vice versa. I mean, just like it's a common thing. And so getting a guy like LaMarcus Barber, coaches might always be like, well, he's good, but, what's he like? Who's he playing against? How's he doing? Like, what's the system look like? And then, he gets to go and bow up with a guy that has some big time offers and is a big name in Kansas City. I think that's what really kind of set him off to kind of go crazy. Plus, incredible wrestler, really good athlete, hard worker. He's a big physical kid. And he plays a lot bigger, a lot stronger than he looks out of pads. I mean, he doesn't look small, but you put pads in him, he looks like a different person. And I think I think a guy like that, K-State got a big one in that one, and I'm kind of excited to see where he goes with that deal.
When you go up against a really talented guy like that, as Marcus Barber, your Showtime, you're maybe even getting your butt kicked some reps, but does that also cause somebody like LaMarcus to maybe raise that game to a level that they hadn't been to before?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Offensive linemen are creatures of habit. If you ever like go into a college O-line room, most of those guys are wearing, eating, drinking, doing the exact same things every single day. We do the same steps a million times. We have to do them in our sleep. We say the same things a million times. Everything we do is creatures of habit. And so if we're not getting pressed every single time or every chance we get, we start to get lulled to sleep. And that's pretty true for a lot of things. And so, I think it's human nature. You're going to elevate to guys you elevate to, and then naturally you're going to play down to the guys you shouldn't play down to, but it happens. And so being able to go line up against guys like that is going to make him look better. It's going to make everybody in that field look better, getting to do things like that. So it helped. It definitely helped him. He went crazy that game, and it was a good job for him.
I wanted to tie it all together with this. First off, I got to get a hat. Second off, though, describe the EOE and where that came from, and maybe how that specific mindset clicks with an offensive lineman.
Yeah, absolutely. So EOE stands for Elevator Eliminate, right? And I don't remember where I was at, where I was standing, what I was doing, what I was wearing. But I remember a coach said that to me one time. He made that comment, and it just resonated with me because basically what it is get better or get out, right? And so much of what we do now, and so much of this recruiting process now is if you're not getting better in what you're doing, you're falling behind everybody else because the window's getting smaller and smaller. The number of kids getting recruited is getting smaller and smaller. So if you're not actively trying to make yourself better, not actively trying to do something that's going to help your game or help those around you get better, you're not getting better, right? You're getting worse. And so that's kind of where that whole mindset comes from. And that's the thought process. If I'm not going out, walking into a game like ready to take somebody's head off, then what am I doing? It's like if I'm not in there to do my job and get what I'm supposed to do and trying to attack everybody the best I can, then I shouldn't even be on the field. And that's kind of the mindset. And, there's just the nastiness, the violence. If you hear me, like when I'm doing weight room workouts, if I'm doing stuff on the field, like the number one thing I say, like when we're doing a movement, if I want more intensity or if I want more speed, like I talk like be more violent. Like I want violence. I want this. I want that. Like that's kind of my main talking point on a lot of those things because that's what has to be resonated on the field is, it's all controlled chaos, but we got to be the ones to control it. We got to be the guys setting the tone. We got to be the guys that are violent, putting hands on people and just trying to be as physical as possible in every situation. So that's kind of that thought process.
Sorry, a couple more questions for me, Coach. First, I know you've talked about some of sort of the bigger names that you've had. Who are maybe a couple sleepers or guys that we should watch out for on Friday nights, guys that are having big off seasons or whatever that you think, hey, these guys are ready to step up into that spotlight a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a couple guys I think that are going to be really, really setting the tone this year is one guy I look at to have a good season is Pete Izzo out of Olathe East. He's going to be center, a little bit shorter stature, but that dude can play some ball. He really can. Jack Botel just got started with me out of Ottawa. Big long kid. He can play some ball. He's got great attitude, great work ethic. I think he's going to look very different on the field come this next season. Very different on the field. Trying to think, there's a couple of guys, Will Seiler, Holden Waring, both. Like honestly, if you want to look at probably who I think is going to be the two best offensive lines in the Metro, I'm looking most likely at Lee Summit High and Liberty High.
Mm-hmm.
And every school's got a dog. Obviously Drake Frank, he's going to be a kid to keep your eyes on too. Out of Liberty North, I think we all know who that guy is. But there's guys all over the city. There's guys all over the city. Unfortunately, I can't sit here and just name every single one of them because we'd be here for probably about an hour. But there's dudes all over the city that can get some ball and get after it, but those are the main guys I'm really looking to have some big off seasons and get going on some things.
I wanted to kind of end with asking you for a prediction. Obviously, Casey Varsity does King of the Hill, and you're bringing some of your guys there. Who's going to win King of the Hill on Saturday? Who's your pick where you're just like, hey, if we're laying odds, I guess, and we won't do that because these are high school kids.
Yeah.
If we were to lay odds, who would maybe be your favorite? Where you're saying, I think this guy's going to win it on Saturday.
Man, I'm gonna be honest. I don't know who all's going and who all's not going.
Yeah.
I really don't. That's the tough question, you know. I mean, I think I got to give it to my guy Drake. If he walks in the building again, I think people are gonna have to be putting a big fight up, you know, and especially for a freshman to come in and get active like that, you know. I think that's something that's gonna put a lot of people on notice.
What makes it? I want to ask you real quick
Yep.
because for those of you who watched last episode, we did talk about Drake. He was the guy that won King of the Hill at First Casey Varsity. What is it that makes Drake so good at this point? I mean, obviously, you don't see freshmen come in and do well in those sorts of events very often. What have you noticed from Drake that's making him stand out?
Honestly, like he's just obsessed with the game. Like he wants to be good. He really does want to be good. He's been well taught up until this point and is going to continue to be well taught. Um, you know, I think that's the biggest thing is like he's got such a great base of his coaching and training, and obviously Coach Lou does a fantastic job. And with him adding Coach Stal up there, I mean, I don't know if you can get a better line room for coaches up there at Liberty North than what he has. And so, you know, like being able to come out of a system like that with coaches like that who've produced guys and help their team win big time games and create kind of a household name for Liberty North here in Kansas City. You know, I think that plays a big role in him and his development and where he's at and where he's going to go. So
He's got a little bit of that nasty to him too. That
100%. You know, honestly, I don't know if he is, but another guy you got to look at that's in that same class is Brock Barrows. I mean, that kid, you don't see many other freshmen that have that much size that's attacking people like that. And so, you know, I would say maybe if he's walking in the building, he might be a guy to keep your eyes on too. So I don't know. I don't know if he is, but I'm just saying if he is, that would maybe be one of the other favorites I would look at. But it is that freshman class, that young class, I apologize. There's going to be
you're fine.
Some big time ball players coming out. So
Can I ask one more thing? I know we're running late, but thank you for your time. But you reminded me of something just now because you were talking about kind of the violence, the aggression, right? And so many times Kevin and I will go and there might be somebody that's really hyped up and we love, you know, how big he is or how long he is and how technical he is or how athletic he is, how well he moves for his size. But there's something that Kevin and I like about a kid that's able to kind of go dark a little bit when they need to, right? When the Jekyll Hyde, clicks on and they can just a little bit of that prick comes out, right? Like in the trenches. Is it hard? Like I would imagine there's some kids that you train that have it and there's other kids. Do you feel like it's a struggle to turn that on, or over time, every offensive lineman just seems to develop it?
I mean, I think everybody's different. You know, you got guys in the league right now that are just calm guys. They're calm. They're still violent players, but they're like, nothing about them seems violent. It's all just calm, you know, and it's all just based off their personality and based off their environment growing up and, you know, that stuff. If like you came from maybe rougher background or like you've gone through some trials and tribulations, it's pretty easy for you to find some hatred in your heart and, you know, take it out on some guys on the field. But, you know, if you've been blessed with your life and everything's good, you know, you might have to go to some deeper places or find other things that kind of sets that temperature for you and gets going. And so, you know, everybody's different. Everybody's that's like very subjective, but you know, if you could find a way just to be that jerk, be that prick and just find ways to get bodies on the floor. I mean, that's what guys want to see.
That's what I want to see.
Yeah,
for sure. Coach, if there's a parent out there or a player who's watching this that wants to find out more, you know, about possibly training with you or what you do, how can they get a hold of you?
Best way is going to be my Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it. I still call it Twitter, or Instagram. Both are Chris Gomez 54, C Gomez 54. I'm terrible remembering that stuff, but like either of those, you reach out to me through that. Give me a follow. Get you taken care of that way, or through my website, which is EOE Football Training. Be able to get going that way. You can book sessions either way through me or through the website. Just all I want to do is I just want to give back. I want to help guys make some money and reach some goals. That's my whole goal here.
You're on the right show. It's Chris Gomez 54.
Perfect. Appreciate it. Look at that. Live fact checking right there, getting after it. Love it.
That is internet usage at its finest. Well,
my problem is I'm using my phone, so I can't just pop off.
Oh, yeah. No, you're in a handicap on this thing.
Yeah.
We have our computers right here, but
absolutely.
Thanks again, Coach, for your time, and thanks to all of you out there watching and following along with us here on the Verbal Commitment Podcast here on KCSN. If you enjoyed watching or listening, leave us a comment, like this video, subscribe here on YouTube, or hit us with a 5-star rating wherever you get your podcasts, audio platforms. And until next time, we'll see you on the trail, and take care.